I still remember the exact moment my perfect baby shower turned into a nightmare. My name is Emily Turner. I'm 32 years old and 7 months pregnant with what will be the first grandchild in my husband James's family. I met James 4 years ago at a charity fundraiser where we both volunteered, and after a whirlwind romance, we got married just a year later. At first, everything seemed perfect, even my relationship with my mother-in-law Patricia, who insisted I call her Patty from day one. She seemed warm and welcoming, always including me in family gatherings and asking about my work as a marketing executive. The problems started small, so small that I brushed them off as normal mother-in-law tensions. But they grew over time, especially after I announced my pregnancy. Patricia immediately insisted on hosting my baby shower at her suburban mansion, saying it was family tradition for the grandmother to host. James was thrilled, telling me how lucky I was that his mother wanted to be so involved. I reluctantly agreed, trying to embrace her enthusiasm for her first grandchild. For weeks, I helped with planning, sent her my guest list, and even compromised on the gender-neutral theme I wanted in favor of her preferred pink explosion since we're having a girl. The day of the shower arrived, and despite my swollen ankles and constant backaches, I plastered on a smile as I greeted guests in Patricia's immaculately decorated home. Everything seemed to be going according to plan until halfway through the gift opening when the doorbell rang. Patricia practically sprinted to answer it, returning with a tall, perfectly toned woman carrying an extravagantly wrapped gift and wearing a smirk that made my stomach drop. "Emily, you remember Vanessa, don't you?" Patricia announced loudly. "James's girlfriend before you." The room fell silent as Vanessa locked eyes with me, her smile never reaching her eyes. I felt the baby kick hard, as if sensing my sudden surge of stress hormones. In that moment, I knew this wasn't a coincidence. The nausea hit me like a wave, and it wasn't pregnancy-related. James shifted uncomfortably beside me but said nothing as his ex-girlfriend, the woman Patricia had compared me to countless times, took a seat directly across from us, crossing her long legs and placing her gift prominently on the table. To understand how we got to this moment, we need to go back to when I first met Patricia at a family dinner 3 years ago. James had been nervous about introducing me to his parents, which should have been my first warning sign. We arrived at their sprawling colonial-style home, and Patricia greeted me with a tight hug that felt more performative than genuine. "So this is the woman who's captured my James's heart," she'd said, looking me up and down in a way that made me feel like I was being appraised rather than welcomed. Throughout dinner, she asked probing questions about my family background, subtly highlighting the differences between my middle-class upbringing and their old-money lifestyle. When I mentioned my career in marketing, she nodded with a thin smile and said, "How nice to have little hobbies until you start a family," despite my attempts to explain that I was actually a department director. After dessert, Patricia insisted on showing me family photos, which I initially thought was sweet until I realized every third picture featured James with Vanessa. "They dated for nearly 5 years, you know," she said casually. Her father and James's father were college roommates. "They've been like family to us since before James was born." Later that night, James explained that his mother had always been close with Vanessa's family and had even once joked about planning their wedding. "But that's all in the past now," he assured me. "Mom will warm up to you, she just needs time." I tried everything to build a relationship with Patricia over the next several months. I learned to cook James's favorite childhood meals using her recipes, asked for her input on decorating our apartment, and listened to countless stories about James's childhood and family history. Still, the subtle digs continued. She'd rearrange dishes I'd washed claiming they weren't clean enough, suggest clothing that would flatter my figure better, and constantly bring up Vanessa's accomplishments. Vanessa just made partner at her law firm, she'd mentioned casually during Sunday dinner. Or, "Vanessa's mother and I are planning another charity event together. She's such a dear friend." The first major incident came during our first Thanksgiving together. I had spent days helping prepare the meal, and as we all sat down to eat, Patricia turned to me and said, "Can you pass the cranberry sauce, Vanessa?" The table went silent before she covered her mouth with an exaggerated gasp. "Oh my goodness, Emily. I'm so sorry. What a silly slip of the tongue." But the gleam in her eyes told me it was no accident. When I brought it up to James later, he sighed and said I was being too sensitive. Mom feels terrible about it. She's just used to Vanessa being around during holidays. Give her time to adjust, Emily. Please, for me. 8 months into our relationship, James proposed on a sunset beach walk during a weekend getaway. I was ecstatic, immediately calling my parents and sister with the news while James beamed beside me. But when it came time to tell his parents, his smile tightened around the edges. Let's tell them in person, he suggested, which seemed reasonable enough. That weekend, we drove to their house for dinner, where I proudly showed off my engagement ring, a vintage emerald-cut diamond that had belonged to James's grandmother. Patricia's reaction was physically painful to witness. Her lips pursed as though she'd tasted something sour, and she took several long seconds before forcing a smile. Well, that was fast, she finally said, carefully avoiding looking at my ring. James always said he wanted a long engagement. James's father, Robert, was more enthusiastic, hugging us both and pouring champagne, while Patricia excused herself to the kitchen for several minutes. When she returned, her eyes were slightly red, but she raised her glass in a toast that felt more like a eulogy. Wedding planning became a battlefield almost immediately. Patricia had strong opinions about everything from venues to flower arrangements, often steamrolling my preferences under the guise of family tradition. She insisted the wedding be held at their country club rather than the botanical garden I'd dreamed of, and when I selected a modern, sleek wedding dress, she pulled out a yellowed photo of the lace monstrosity she'd worn and suggested I consider honoring the family by wearing something similar. The breaking point came during what should have been a special mother-daughter bonding experience, wedding dress shopping. I'd arranged an appointment at a bridal boutique and invited my mother, sister, and Patricia to join me. When we arrived, I was shocked to find Vanessa sitting in the waiting area. Patricia greeted her with an enthusiastic hug. "I hope you don't mind," Patricia said to me, though her tone made it clear my opinion was irrelevant. "Vanessa has such exquisite taste, and since she's practically family..." I pulled Patricia aside while my mother distracted Vanessa with awkward small talk. "This is my wedding dress shopping day," I whispered, trying to keep my voice level. "Having your son's ex-girlfriend here is completely inappropriate." Patricia's face hardened. "Vanessa has been like a daughter to me for over a decade. I meant well. She's an excellent stylist and could help you find something that would actually flatter you." That evening, I told James about the incident, expecting his support. Instead, he ran his hand through his hair and sighed. Mom probably thought she was being helpful. Vanessa does work in fashion, after all. This led to our first major fight, with me in tears asking how he could possibly think having his ex at my dress fitting was acceptable. "You're overreacting," he said. "Mom loves you, she's just set in her ways. Please, can we not make this a big deal? For me?" I gave in, as I often did when it came to Patricia, but something shifted in me that day. I started keeping a journal documenting Patricia's behavior, partly to validate my own feelings and partly because I was beginning to doubt my sanity. The wedding day itself was beautiful despite Patricia's interference. She showed up in an off-white dress that was dangerously close to bridal, but my sister accidentally spilled red wine on it during cocktail hour. During her toast, Patricia managed to mention how James finally found someone after Vanessa, and how she was adjusting to the idea of Emily joining our close-knit family. I saw several guests exchange uncomfortable glances, but I maintained my smile, refusing to let her ruin our day. The problems only escalated during our first year of marriage. James and I had purchased a modest craftsman-style home about 30 minutes from his parents, which I thought would give us enough distance to establish our own household while still being close enough for regular visits. I was wrong. Patricia began showing up unannounced, often when James was at work and I was working from home. "Just thought I'd drop by and help you organize these kitchen cabinets properly," she'd say. Or, "I noticed your front garden could use some attention." Without asking permission, she'd rearrange our furniture, replace throw pillows with ones she'd bought that better matched the room, and once I even caught her going through our mail. When I gently suggested she call before visiting, she looked wounded. "I didn't realize I needed an invitation to see my own son, and I'm only trying to help you, Emily. Not everyone is fortunate enough to have a mother-in-law who cares so much." During this time, my career was taking off. I was promoted to senior marketing director, which meant longer hours, but also a significant salary increase. Patricia's criticism intensified in direct proportion to my professional success. "I don't know how James feels about having dinner alone so often," she'd comment. Or, "In my day, a wife's priority was creating a beautiful home for her husband." James would defend me in the moment, telling his mother that he was proud of my accomplishments, but in private, he'd often echo her concerns. "You have been working late a lot," he'd say. "Mom's just worried about us." Thanksgiving at their house that year was a particular disaster. I had offered to bring several side dishes, spending hours perfecting my grandmother's cornbread stuffing and a maple bourbon. Sweet potato casserole. When I set them on Patricia's buffet, she wrinkled her nose. "Oh, you brought food. How thoughtful. I've already prepared everything we need, but we can put these on the kids' table." Throughout dinner, she made pointed comments about my cooking, being different and not what James is used to, all while pointedly not taking a single bite of my contributions. The extended family exchanged awkward glances, but said nothing. Christmas brought its own tensions. Patricia gave James a vintage watch that I later learned had been a gift from Vanessa years ago, which she had held onto just in case. She also gave us monogrammed hand towels with James's initials only, explaining that, "Since you kept your maiden name, Emily, I wasn't sure what to put." The real shock came in January when I dropped by Patricia's house to return a serving dish and accidentally overheard her on the phone, laughing and making lunch plans. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, Vanessa darling. I've missed our little chats." When Patricia saw me standing there, she quickly ended the call and acted as though nothing unusual had happened. That evening, I asked James if he knew his mother still regularly met with his ex-girlfriend. His reaction startled me. He became immediately defensive, almost angry. "They've known each other since childhood, Emily. You can't expect Mom to cut off a relationship that's important to her just because we're married now." When I pointed out how strange and hurtful it was for his mother to maintain such a close relationship with his ex, while simultaneously undermining me, he accused me of trying to control who his mother could be friends with. This fight was different from our others, colder, with words chosen to wound. For the first time, I went to bed wondering if I had made a mistake in marrying someone who couldn't or wouldn't establish appropriate boundaries with his mother. As winter turned to spring, I found myself increasingly isolated. Patricia had subtly poisoned several of James's family friends against me with comments about how I was changing James and keeping him from family events, when in reality, I was encouraging him to see his family without me to avoid Patricia's barbs. I started to doubt myself constantly, wondering if I really was the problem. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe Patricia's thinly veiled hostility was all in my imagination. The gaslighting was working. Last fall, after trying for 6 months, I discovered I was pregnant. 2 pink lines appeared on the test, and I sat on the bathroom floor crying with joy and terror in equal measure. Joy at the life growing inside me, terror at the thought of Patricia having even more access to our lives. When I told James, he swept me into his arms, his eyes shining with tears. "This is the best day of my life," he whispered against my hair. We agreed to wait until the 12-week mark to tell family, treasuring this secret between just the two of us. Those were perhaps the happiest weeks of our marriage, planning and dreaming together about our future child. At 12 weeks, we invited both sets of parents to dinner at our home to share the news. My parents were openly emotional, my mother already talking about knitting baby blankets while my father discreetly wiped away tears. Patricia's reaction was bizarre by comparison. She squealed and immediately rushed to James, embracing him tightly as though he'd accomplished this miracle all by himself. "My baby is having a baby," she exclaimed, then almost as an afterthought gave me a quick pat on the shoulder. "How are you feeling, Emily? Morning sickness? You look a bit peaky." Throughout dinner, she directed all baby-related questions to James as if he were the one carrying the child. As the weeks passed, Patricia's interference reached new heights. She began suggesting baby names with family significance, which I later discovered were names from Vanessa's family tree. "Elizabeth would be perfect for a girl," she said during one visit. It was Vanessa's grandmother's name, and James always said he loved it. When I mentioned we were considering the name Olivia, Patricia wrinkled her nose. "That's becoming so common, dear." Wouldn't you want something more distinctive? She took over nursery planning without asking, showing up one weekend with paint samples and fabric swatches in colors I had specifically said I didn't want. "Trust me, Emily," she said dismissively when I tried to express my preferences. "I've been thinking about my grandchild's nursery for years. You lack experience in these matters." One afternoon, I came home early from work with terrible nausea to find Patricia in our house, on the phone in our nursery, which James had given her a key to in case of emergencies. I paused outside the door when I heard her say, "Yes, we've always followed that tradition in our family. Emily doesn't understand the importance of these things, but I'm sure once the baby arrives." She noticed me and quickly ended the call, claiming it was just a friend asking about the pregnancy. Later that week, James started working longer hours, often coming home after I was already in bed. When I tried to talk to him about my concerns with his mother, he seemed distant, preoccupied. "Can we not do this right now, Em? I'm exhausted." Or, "You're being hormonal, she's just excited about the baby." As my pregnancy progressed, I developed gestational diabetes and had to carefully monitor my diet. Patricia used this as another opportunity to criticize me. "If you had been in better shape before getting pregnant, this probably wouldn't have happened," she said, while watching me test my blood sugar. She began bringing over sugary foods I couldn't eat, claiming they were James's favorites, and that I shouldn't deprive him just because I had dietary restrictions. The comments about my changing body became relentless. "My goodness, you're carrying so much in your face," she'd say, or, "I only gained 20 pounds with James. Have you been weighing yourself regularly?" At my 20-week scan, we learned we were having a girl. James was thrilled, but Patricia seemed oddly disappointed. "Well, I suppose a girl is nice too," she said. Although the first grandchild in the family is traditionally a boy. When I called her out on this ridiculous statement, she backpedaled, claiming I had misunderstood due to pregnancy brain. By my third trimester, I was physically uncomfortable, emotionally exhausted, and reaching my breaking point. But every time I considered confronting Patricia directly, I thought about the stress it would cause and the potential impact on my baby. So I continued to smile through her insults, redirect her inappropriate suggestions, and cry only in the shower where no one could hear me. I was becoming a shadow of myself, and the worst part was that James either didn't notice or chose not to see it. When I was 6 months pregnant, Patricia called to inform me rather than ask me that she would be hosting my baby shower at her home. "It's tradition for the grandmother to host," she declared in a tone that brooked no argument. "I've already picked a date that works for everyone important." I tried to suggest having it at our house or a restaurant to reduce my commute, but she dismissed my concerns. "Don't be difficult, Emily. I'm doing you a favor. Most women would be grateful for a mother-in-law who wants to be so involved." When I mentioned this to James, hoping for support, he seemed surprised by my reluctance. "Mom's offering to handle everything, Em. With your diabetes and the doctor saying you need to rest more, isn't it nice not to have to worry about planning a party?" Trapped by his logic and Patricia's determination, I reluctantly agreed, but insisted on providing my own guest list of close friends and coworkers. Patricia's response was a non-committal, "Of course, dear, just email it to me." As the shower date approached, several red flags appeared. My best friend Sophia called, sounding uncomfortable. "Patricia called me asking some really strange questions about your past relationships and whether you're still in contact with any exes," she reported. "She also wanted to know if you've been emotional lately and whether I thought you were stable enough to handle motherhood." It felt like she was fishing for something negative. Another friend from work mentioned that Patricia had called to regretfully inform her that the shower venue had changed, providing an incorrect address. When I confronted Patricia about these incidents, she feigned innocence. "I was just trying to get to know your friends better, Emily, and the address mix-up was an honest mistake." Meanwhile, I began hearing through family channels that Patricia had been telling relatives that I was emotionally fragile during my pregnancy and that they should be careful what they said around me because I was liable to break down at any moment. This campaign of subtle undermining continued as the shower approached. 1 week before the event, I stopped by Patricia's house to drop off some decorations I'd purchased, using the key she'd given James for emergencies only, since she wasn't answering her phone. As I set the bags down in her living room, I noticed a guest list on her coffee table and froze when I saw Vanessa's name prominently circled with a star next to it. I took a photo with my phone as evidence before Patricia emerged from the kitchen, quickly snatching up the paper when she noticed my gaze. "Emily, I wasn't expecting you." When I asked directly about Vanessa being on the guest list, Patricia laughed it off. "Oh, you must be mistaken, dear. That was probably for another event I'm planning. Pregnancy brain playing tricks on you again." That night, I showed James the photo, but even with this evidence, he hesitated to confront his mother. Maybe she just hasn't removed Vanessa from her standard party guest template. Let me talk to her before you get upset. But his talk resulted in nothing but Patricia tearfully claiming I was looking for reasons to drive a wedge between her and James, and that she would never do anything to hurt her precious daughter-in-law. The dismissiveness of both of them made something shift inside me. I became determined to discover what Patricia was really planning. 2 days before the shower, I volunteered to help Patricia with food preparation. While she was preoccupied with a phone call from the caterer, I quickly checked her cell phone that she'd left on the counter. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions and revealed even more than I'd imagined. There were dozens of text messages between Patricia and Vanessa planning what they referred to as the surprise. Vanessa, "Are you sure this is a good idea? James might not appreciate it." Patricia, "Trust me, he misses you. He's just too loyal to admit it. Once he sees you, he'll remember what he's missing. Emily's hormonal anyway, and after the baby comes, who knows if their marriage will survive." But that wasn't all. As I quickly scrolled through her messages, another name caught my eye. Michael. The texts between Patricia and this Michael person were explicitly romantic and referenced their special weekends, when Patricia told her husband she was visiting her sister. I took screenshots of everything, sending them to my own phone before carefully replacing hers exactly as I'd found it. Back at home, I did some research and discovered Michael was Patricia's golf instructor of 2 years, a man 15 years her junior. Further digging on social media revealed photos of them together at a resort 3 states away, looking far more intimate than student and teacher should. Over the next day, I gathered and saved more evidence of both Patricia's planned ambush with Vanessa and her long-running affair, all while maintaining a facade of naive excitement about the upcoming shower. I said nothing to James, making the conscious decision to wait. If Patricia wanted a dramatic reveal at my baby shower, she would certainly get one, just not the one she had planned. The morning of the baby shower arrived with appropriately dramatic weather, dark clouds threatening rain that never quite came, much like the storm brewing inside me. I arrived at Patricia's house 2 hours early as she had demanded, dressed in the pale pink maternity dress she had bought me that was both uncomfortable and unflattering. James dropped me off, promising to return shortly before the event started after running errands that Patricia had conveniently assigned him. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "Try to enjoy today, okay? Mom's worked really hard on this." As if her efforts somehow negated her intentions. Inside, Patricia was directing a small army of caterers and decorators, barely acknowledging my arrival with a distracted wave. When I offered to help with the flower arrangements, she shooed me away. No, you'll just do it wrong. Go sit down before you tire yourself out. You're looking particularly swollen today." The decorations were overwhelmingly pink and frilly, nothing like the modern woodland theme I had mentioned wanting. The cake featured a baby girl in a crown with Daddy's Little Princess written in elaborate script. Everything screamed Patricia, with no element reflecting my taste or preferences. As guests began to arrive, Patricia stationed herself at the door like a royal receiving subjects, introducing herself as Grandma Patricia to my friends and coworkers. I noticed she had seated all my friends at tables far from the gift opening area, while her friends and family occupied the prime spots. "Be grateful," she hissed in my ear as I began to question the arrangement. "Do you know how much this is costing us? Most women would be thrilled to have a mother-in-law who cares this much." I plastered on a smile and greeted my guests, trying to ignore the strange atmosphere among Patricia's friends, who kept giving me pitying looks and whispering among themselves. James arrived and was immediately swept into a conversation with his mother's friends, leaving me to navigate the awkward social dynamics alone. Halfway through the gift opening session, the doorbell rang. Patricia practically leapt to her feet. "I'll get it," she announced with poorly concealed excitement. And there she was, Vanessa, looking stunning in a form-fitting blue dress that highlighted everything my pregnancy had temporarily taken from me. She carried an ostentatiously wrapped gift and wore a smirk that made my skin crawl. "Look who made it!" Patricia announced, her voice carrying across the room. "Vanessa, darling, come in. Everyone, this is Vanessa, who's practically family. She and James have known each other since they were children." The room fell silent as Vanessa made her way to a seat that had been conspicuously left empty next to James, who looked uncomfortable but didn't object. Patricia beamed like a matchmaker watching her plan unfold, while I sat surrounded by half-opened baby gifts, feeling like I was having an out-of-body experience. "So good to see you again, James," Vanessa said, her hand lingering on his arm. "You're looking very well." I excused myself to the bathroom, where I finally let a few tears escape. The humiliation was exactly what Patricia had planned. Me, waddling away while the beautiful ex-girlfriend cozied up to my husband. A knock at the door startled me, and Sophia slipped in, pulling me into a fierce hug. "I'm about 10 seconds away from creating a scene these country club vultures will never forget," she whispered. "Just say the word." I shook my head, wiping away tears. "I have a better plan. Just be ready to record with your phone when dessert is served." When I returned, the seating had been rearranged for lunch, with Vanessa now directly beside James and me moved further away, ostensibly to make room for my pregnant belly. Throughout the meal, I watched as Vanessa touched James's arm repeatedly, laughed at inside jokes Patricia deliberately brought up, and generally behaved as though she was the guest of honor rather than me. James looked increasingly uncomfortable, but didn't shut down the situation as any decent husband should have. After the main course, Patricia stood up, clinking her glass for attention. "Before we serve dessert, I want to share something special. I've made James's favorite chocolate mousse cake from Vanessa's grandmother's recipe. James, darling, remember how you always said it was the best dessert you'd ever had? That was it. That was the final straw." As Patricia directed the caterers to serve her special dessert, I caught Sophia's eye and gave her a subtle nod. It was time. I stood up slowly, one hand supporting my belly, and tapped my water glass with a spoon. The gentle chime silenced the room, all eyes turning to me with expressions ranging from curiosity to pity. "I'd like to say a few words before dessert," I announced, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "First, I want to thank everyone who came today to celebrate this baby girl who will be joining our family in just a few months, especially my true friends who have supported me through a challenging pregnancy." I made deliberate eye contact with Sophia and my other friends, drawing strength from their encouraging nods. I also want to acknowledge the special effort that my mother-in-law Patricia has put into today's event. She's clearly been planning this for quite some time, with very specific goals in mind. Patricia's smile faltered slightly as I continued. "In fact, I recently discovered just how much planning went into today, and I thought it might be nice to share some of that with all of you." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. "James, would you mind connecting this to your mother's TV? I have some memories I'd like to share with everyone." James looked confused but complied, likely assuming I wanted to show ultrasound images or pregnancy photos. Little did he know. "Thank you, honey," I said as the connection was established. "Now let me show everyone what a baby shower is really about." I pulled up the first screenshot. Patricia's text with Vanessa discussing the plan to use my baby shower as an opportunity to rekindle her relationship with James. The messages appeared on the large TV screen for everyone to see, including the part where Patricia called me hormonal and questioned if our marriage would survive the baby's arrival. Gasps echoed around the room as I swiped to the next screenshot, showing Patricia instructing Vanessa on what to wear and how to act. Wear the blue dress he always loved. Sit next to him. Touch his arm when you laugh at his jokes. Remind him of what he's missing. James's face drained of color as he stared at his mother's words. Patricia lurched toward me, reaching for my phone. "You had no right to go through my private messages," she shrieked, accidentally knocking over a crystal punch bowl in her haste. The crash punctuated the moment perfectly as punch spread across the pristine white tablecloth like blood. "Actually, these messages were left open on a phone in a room I was invited into," I replied calmly. "But we're just getting started." I continued to the next set of screenshots, revealing Patricia's long-running affair with Michael the golf instructor. There were explicit texts, hotel reservations, and photos of them together on days Patricia had claimed to be visiting her sister. I looked directly at Robert, Patricia's husband of 35 years, as his face crumpled in shock and betrayal. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, Robert," I said genuinely. "But I thought you should know the truth about the woman who claims to value family above all else." The final texts I displayed showed Patricia discussing her plans with Michael. Once James realizes his mistake with Emily, things will go back to how they should be. He was happier with Vanessa anyway. This baby is just complicating everything. The room was so silent you could hear the ice melting in abandoned drinks. I turned to face James directly, my voice quivering slightly for the first time. "I've spent 3 years trying to please a woman who never intended to accept me. I've watched you repeatedly choose your mother's feelings over your wife's. I've endured insults, manipulation, and now this public humiliation, all while carrying your child." Tears streamed down my face, but I refused to wipe them away. "I love you, James, but I will not raise our daughter in an environment where her mother is disrespected and her father is too weak to stand up for his family." I picked up my purse and turned to address the stunned crowd. "Thank you all for coming. The truth has been my gift to everyone today. Enjoy the special dessert." With that, I walked out, head held high despite the tears still flowing. Behind me, I could hear the chaos erupting. Patricia's wailing, Robert's demanding questions, James calling my name, and Vanessa's hurried excuses as she tried to exit unnoticed. But I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. For 3 days after the baby shower, I stayed with my sister Olivia, ignoring the barrage of calls and texts from James. I needed space to process everything and decide what I wanted for my future and my child's future. My sister was my rock, alternating between bringing me ice cream, listening to me cry, and fiercely declaring that James didn't deserve me or the baby. "You should have seen Patricia's face when those texts appeared on screen," Sophia reported during a visit, showing me the video she'd recorded. Total shock, then rage, then fear when she realized everyone was seeing her affair too. Classic narcissist response. She was more angry about being exposed than remorseful for what she did. On the 4th day, James showed up at Olivia's doorstep, unshaven and hollow-eyed. My sister was reluctant to let him in, but respected my decision to talk to him. "I've been looking everywhere for you," he said, as we sat in Olivia's small garden, a neutral territory where we could speak privately, but I still felt safe. "Why didn't you tell me what you found on my mother's phone?" I laughed without humor. "Would you have believed me? You've never believed me before when I told you how she treated me. You've always taken her side, made excuses for her behavior." James ran his hands through his unwashed hair. "I would have this time. I swear, Emily. I had no idea she was planning to invite Vanessa. I knew they still had lunch sometimes, but I never thought—" "That's the problem, James," I interrupted. "You never thought. You never wanted to see what was happening right in front of you. Do you know how many times I've tried to tell you about your mother's behavior? How many tears I've cried while you dismissed my feelings as overreactions or hormones?" What followed was the most honest conversation of our marriage. James admitted he'd always known his mother was difficult, but had been conditioned since childhood to manage her emotions rather than confront her behavior. He confessed that he had known about her continued relationship with Vanessa, but hadn't thought it was important enough to mention to me. "She's always loved Vanessa," he said weakly. "I didn't think it was a big deal." "It became a big deal when she tried to use my baby shower to reconnect you with your ex," I pointed out. "Can you imagine how that felt? To sit there pregnant, with your child while your mother paraded your ex-girlfriend in front of everyone? To realize that your own husband didn't have the backbone to shut it down immediately?" James started to cry. Something I'd only seen once before when his grandfather died. "I've failed you," he whispered. "I was so focused on keeping peace that I didn't protect the person who should have mattered most. I don't know if you can forgive me, but I need you to know that I love you, not Vanessa. It's always been you." I remained unmoved by his tears, having shed too many of my own. "It's not enough to love me, James. You have to choose me, choose our family. That means setting clear boundaries with your mother. I won't subject our daughter to what I've endured these past 3 years. For the next several hours, we talked through years of accumulated hurt. I showed him my journal documenting Patricia's behavior, which visibly shocked him as he realized the extent of her cruelty. Eventually, we agreed that if our marriage had any chance of survival, we needed professional help and James needed to establish firm boundaries with his mother. She needs to apologize sincerely, not just to me, but to everyone at that shower, I insisted. And if she can't do that, she doesn't get to be part of our lives or our daughter's life. James nodded, looking simultaneously devastated and determined. I understand. I'll talk to her. The week that followed was grueling for both of us. James visited his father, who had moved into a hotel after confronting Patricia about her affair. Dad's a mess, James reported back. Apparently, Mom's been gaslighting him for years, too, making him think he was paranoid whenever he questioned her whereabouts. The affair has been going on for over 2 years. I felt genuine sympathy for Robert, another victim of Patricia's narcissism. James and I began couples counseling, where our therapist helped us establish healthy communication, patterns, and boundaries. After our third session, James returned to our home, sleeping in the guest room at my request until I felt ready to fully reconcile. Patricia attempted reconciliation on her terms almost immediately, showing up at our door with a generic apology, clearly designed to rug sweep the entire incident. I'm sorry if you misunderstood my intentions, she said, not meeting my eyes. I only ever wanted what was best for James and the baby. When I pointed out that this wasn't a real apology, she became defensive, claiming she was being attacked for trying to make peace. James, standing beside me, finally did what I'd been waiting years for him to do. That's not good enough, Mom, he said firmly. You intentionally tried to humiliate my wife at her own baby shower. You've been undermining our marriage from day one. Unless you can acknowledge what you did and sincerely apologize, we need to take a break from seeing you. Patricia's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally calculation as she realized her son was serious. She left in tears, already on the phone to other family members before she reached her car, no doubt spinning the narrative to cast herself as the victim. But for the first time, James hadn't crumbled under her emotional manipulation. It wasn't a perfect response, but it was progress, the first real sign that he was capable of growth and change. 3 months after the baby shower showdown, our daughter Olivia entered the world after 26 hours of labor. James stayed by my side throughout, proving himself to be the supportive partner I'd always hoped he could be. When the nurse placed our red-faced, squalling daughter on my chest, the petty dramas of the past seemed to recede in importance. This tiny human was now our priority, and protecting her from toxic influences became even more crucial than I'd anticipated. Patricia attempted to visit us in the hospital, sending James a text that she was in the parking lot and deserved to meet her granddaughter. James, who had been dozing in a chair beside my bed, showed me the message with raised eyebrows. What do you want me to do? He asked, putting the decision firmly in my hands. Tell her that now isn't a good time, I replied, surprising myself with how calm I felt. We need these first days as our own little family. Instead of arguing or trying to convince me otherwise, James simply nodded and sent the message. When his phone immediately began ringing with his mother's calls, he silenced it and returned his attention to us. This small moment of prioritizing our needs over his mother's demands felt more meaningful than any grand gesture could have. Over the following months, James and I continued therapy, both as a couple and individually. James worked through years of conditioning that had taught him to placate his mother at all costs, while I processed the anger and hurt that had accumulated during our relationship. We learned healthier communication patterns, how to express needs without accusation, and most importantly, how to function as a united team. Meanwhile, Patricia and Robert separated after 35 years of marriage, their relationship irreparably damaged by her affair and the public manner of its exposure. Robert, free from Patricia's manipulation, began rebuilding his relationship with James, becoming a doting grandfather to Olivia and an unexpected ally to me. I should have seen it sooner, he confided during one visit, watching James cradle his daughter. Patricia treated your mother-in-law the same way she treated you. I just never had the courage to call her on it. 6 months after Olivia's birth, Patricia requested a meeting. She had been through therapy of her own, a condition Robert had set for their divorce settlement, and appeared genuinely changed. In a private conversation with just the three of us, she offered the first sincere apology I'd ever heard from her. "I was jealous," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "You took my son, then you were having his baby, and I felt replaced. Instead of embracing my new role as a grandmother, I tried to sabotage your place in his life. What I did was unforgivable, and yet I'm asking for forgiveness anyway. Not because I deserve it, but because I love my son and I want to know my granddaughter." It wasn't a perfect apology. Patricia still had work to do. But it was a start. We established strict boundaries for her interaction with Olivia. Supervised visits only, no undermining our parenting decisions, no negative comments about me, and immediate consequences for boundary violations. To my surprise, Patricia accepted these terms without argument, seemingly understanding the precariousness of her position in our lives. Throughout this journey, I discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. The Emily who had meekly accepted. Patricia's barbs was gone, replaced by a woman who fiercely protected her family and herself. My network of friends expanded, particularly with the women who had witnessed my stand at the baby shower and reached out afterward with their own stories of difficult in-laws and boundary setting. "You're my hero," one of Patricia's own friends confided at Olivia's christening. "I've watched Patty bulldoze people for 30 years, and you're the first to ever stand up to her successfully." My career continued to flourish as well, with a promotion to marketing VP that allowed me flexible hours to balance work and motherhood. The confidence I gained from standing up to Patricia translated into assertiveness in the boardroom that had previously eluded me. As for James and me, our marriage emerged stronger but forever changed. There was a period of mourning for the relationship we might have had without Patricia's interference, but also appreciation for the more balanced partnership we were building in its wake. On Olivia's first birthday, as we watched her smash cake, onto her face with delighted abandon, James pulled me close. "Thank you," he whispered against my hair, "for fighting for our family when I couldn't see what was happening, for not giving up on me even when I deserved it." I leaned into his embrace, watching our daughter explore her world with fearless curiosity. "Some lessons have to be learned the hard way," I replied. "Standing up for yourself isn't selfish when you're protecting the people you love." That's something I want Olivia to know from the beginning, not after years of doubting herself like I did. The journey hasn't been perfect. Patricia still occasionally tests boundaries, James sometimes slips into old patterns, and I have moments of residual anger about the years of mistreatment. But healing isn't a destination. It's an ongoing process that requires vigilance and commitment. What I've learned through all of this is that family isn't always defined by blood. Sometimes it's the friends who stand beside you in your darkest moments, the in-law who chooses truth over loyalty, and the partner who finally finds the courage to grow, even when that growth is painful. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was undermining your relationship or self-worth? How did you find the strength to draw that line in the sand? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, sharing our experiences helps others recognize toxic patterns in their own lives. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing for more real-life experiences and lessons learned the hard way. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I hope it gives strength to anyone facing their own Patricia. Sometimes the most important boundaries are the ones that feel impossible to set.